Hi everyone, I am finally back with part 2 of the Kettlebell Snatch tutorial that I promised like 6 months or more ago. Epic failure in delivering content, but now that I am, let's just recap on what we talked about in part 1. Essentially part 1 I talked about 3 things. I talked about your grounding, as in what's going on with your feet, make sure they're planted, make sure you're balanced. Then I went into talking about the kettlebell swing, making sure you have a really strong, first of all, hike back on that very first rep into your strong hip snap so that you can achieve power and not sort of waste energy, because you want to reach a point of being able to control the kettlebell to change its direction so it's more vertical. And the more power that you have, the less sort of pulling on that kettlebell you'll have to do to get it sort of high enough to be able to lock it out. Then I talked a little bit about sort of the top down, meaning like in your head. What's your mindset in doing this? Because the number one thing that happens is people get so frustrated with themselves, or they want to progress too quickly. And then they'll either use a weight that's too heavy, which causes the breakdown of their technique in order to just be able to get the bell up overhead. But it also sort of feeds back negatively into the experience of learning, and this is something that I dealt with. It was just a dreaded exercise. Like, I knew I should do it and all this stuff, and I liked how other people made it look, but I just couldn't get myself to be good at it because I was pressing heavy weights, I was squatting heavy weights, and so I kind of thought, well, I'm strong, so I should be able to use a heavy kettlebell for a kettlebell snatch. But it's so skill intensive, so there's such a learning curve with it that it's just not worth sort of skipping ahead and doing things before you're really ready. So take the time and basically leave your ego at the door and deal with sort of the lighter weight and the consistent practice, and really just honing the progressions of the kettlebell snatch before being a fully fledged kettlebell snatcher. And then I talked a little bit about just a consistent practice and how to do that without burning yourself out, so that you can have sort of low fatigue settings and just working on that skill. But today I want to talk about how to go from the swing into your lockout position, and also a little bit about how you can train your lockout, and also then the trajectory of the kettlebell from the top into the swing again and down. So that's basically covers all of this, the kettlebell snatch. So I'm just going to go over here and then we'll start breaking down the movement. So to give you a little visual first of all, so that you can sort of picture it, and then I'll talk about it, I'll just do a quick demo of the sort of the elements that are going to come together with my tiny kettlebell. Actually, I don't know why I'm using my tiny one. Alright, I'll use this one. Assuming that your kettlebell swing is super, and what I mean by super is that you create enough power directed from your hips to direct the kettlebell into this kind of weightless zone. So when you snap your hips, the arm's floating up, and that means you have more sort of, you can control it better, you can pull it in and then into the lockout position. So that's the bottom part of the snatch is your swing, and over the top of the kettlebell snatch is your lockout. And if you have never really locked out at speed before, or done a lot of overhead work, maybe having that awareness of where it is you actually need to punch through, then it's going to be a lot harder to gauge how you are locking out with the kettlebell snatch when you have this weight flying up and you have to sort of meet it somewhere. So having that awareness is key. So that brings me to what's going on overhead. That would be you'd want to be able to press the kettlebell up overhead, and this is a good lockout position. You want to have your elbow locked out and your wrist obviously above that. You want to keep your wrist straight, and with the shoulder mobility has to allow for the arm to kind of go back to around your ear or close to it. Now, you don't try to do this or kind of this or kind of make your ear go forward by sticking your head forward. Try to make it happen from the shoulder and locking the shoulder down so that it's more stable. And basically your weight ends up, or the load of the kettlebell ends up kind of over your hips. So you almost want it to be back. Keeping your hips under your ribs as much as possible. You don't want a huge arch when you're overhead, because when you're overhead like this, obviously you need more stability, and that comes from your foundation, which is the floor, and your feet. And if you're kind of loose here in the middle, then you're still directing forces through the body down to the floor. So having this sort of alignment will help you stay more stable. And this lockout position can be achieved in your military press, your overhead carries, and also the push press. Because the push press is actually kind of a nice one if you're proficient at it and you've practiced it, but you're essentially punching up and locking out at speed, just like you would try to do with the kettlebell snatch. So it's that sort of rapid punch through at the top. Obviously you can do that with your press as well, but it's not quite as sort of speedy. So assuming then that you have practiced where you're going to actually lock out, then you can begin to sort of fill in the middle. How you do that can be achieved in two different ways. Usually you can go from the swing up, or you can go from the lockout down. I've used both with clients, and it just depends on the person. So I'm going to show you the swing up, and then I'll show you the lockout down. When you're doing these methods, you want to keep it that way. So I'm only going to practice from the ground up, and then I'm going to lower another way. So I'm not going to go then from the top down. I'm going to use it so I'm repeating the same half of this kettlebell snatch. So I'll do my swing lockout, and then I'll usually press it down. So it's like the half snatch. And likewise, I'm going from the top down. I'm going to go down into the swing and then place the kettlebell on the floor, or I'll clean it and then press it again. So still a half. And then eventually you'll put both halves together. So the swing up, then you're going to go from your strong hike position. You're going to do a few reps of the swing, and you're going to go from the swing, then you need to pull it close. So pulling it is a bit like a high pull, so that kind of has to be usually around sort of the height of your face, or around sort of forehead height. You're going to have it up here, and then it's going to be your lockout at the top. You want to meet the kettlebell in lockout. So you don't want to get there first, then the kettlebell's going to be lagging behind, and sometimes it might flop over, or you don't want the kettlebell to be ahead of you and you sort of overshooting your lockout. You want to try to time it so that you get there at the same time or a little bit before, so that the kettlebell will just nestle onto your hand and not create any drama. So you're going to go from your swing, strong swing, do a few reps, into a pull, and then up overhead and lower. Okay? Temptation is to then try to sort of throw it away and try it from the swing, or going back into the swing. And then from here you can go back into your clean and more swings. You can do these in multiple reps, or you can just do singles. You can do like single swing and then single high pull, and then snatch. Okay? Well, I did it the way I said not to do it. Habit. So obviously I would have pressed that down. The issue here that I see is that it stays too much of a swing. And what that does is, if you imagine, I'll get my wee kettlebell. This is out here, too much. And then I go into this position and look, plop. First of all, the speed at which you're directing out here, and then you're kind of pulling it up like this. So not only does this usually bash up your forearm, but this is an awful common way of over shooting with the kettlebell. So it ends up going around a big circle. So it's going to try to pull you around with a big circle. And you don't want that. You want to be in control. So you need to have awareness of what height you need to start pulling it into a sort of it's called a high pull, but I mean basically you're just pulling it close so that you're changing the trajectory of the kettlebell from a huge arc into a more or less straight one, which is up into your lockout. And the other problem is a death grip. If you have a death grip on the kettlebell because you're maybe afraid of flying away, like what happened to me one time, and you're going to keep that grip, so that's creating friction, which means the kettlebell isn't going to naturally move in your hands. So you need to have confidence with sort of basically catching it in the fingers and going from hand to fingers. So that means that the grip can't be a death grip, and you're going to cut off your hand and all sorts of stuff. So let in your swing, let your fingertips or your fingers do more than your entire hand. Okay, so having the fingers around it will allow you then to kind of loosen that grip, so you can go into this position and then it will go back into this one. If you've done the kettlebell clean, then, which I would say master that one first, is definitely that will teach you how to do that without going all the way from the top and then having to catch it. When I was learning this, it was probably that was one of the number one problems for me, and that usually happened more from the top down, was my inability to catch it in my fingers, and so I'd tear up my hands, and then when I tore up my hands on the way down, then I'd pull on the way back up. It was just a mess. So learn from my mistakes. So that's pulling it in, holding it, pulling it tight, or pulling it close. Pulling it close, locking it out overhead, and then pressing it down. On the other side of things, if you're going from the top down into the swing, this is great because first of all it teaches you that trajectory. So whereas it's hard sometimes to gauge how far you're actually going to tame it from that swing, but on the way down you're basically aiming for where you want to go. And I've heard it cued to aim for your stomach, or aim for, you're chasing your zipper with it. So you're basically wanting to pull it down actively toward, to allow you then to hinge back, and then that allows you to slow the kettlebell or catch it. So you're basically able to receive the kettlebell at the right time and get that loading again into your hips, so that then when you start to swing back up again, you get this, and then it just becomes, you're following the same path on the way up as you just did on the way down, and vice versa. So sometimes from the top down is a great way to drill it if you're struggling with taming the arc at the beginning. So getting that sort of high pull, or you're so used to swinging and you can't seem to get that sort of taming, so to go from the top down. So to make that, this is how it would look if I remember to, so you're going to press it up, or push press it up overhead. Now when you're here, if it's hard style, you'll basically flip over a hand, so you're going to actually throw it down like that. You're going to throw it. If you're doing something more like sport style, which I didn't want to cover in this, but then you might actually do more of a corkscrew down, so you're actually going to move out of the way of the kettlebell, and then you're going to catch it, and usually with your thumb forward. But if you're doing it with the usual style, you're just actually going to throw it down. And just be aware, because that throwing it down is very active, and so you're essentially going to almost speed it up a bit. So you're going to push it down a hill, and you have to be able to catch it. So make sure you have a good floor to just in case it drops. So back up into the lockout again, rack position, press. From here, I'm going to throw it down, and then you can do a swing and then back. So really, I'm so used to doing the whole thing, it's hard for me to stop myself. So if I go into my press, I want to practice as well that final rep. So if you don't know how to slow the kettlebell down at the end, this is also a nice drill to do. When you're going from the top, you're going to throw into your back swing, and then landing a plane on a runway, you're going to go into your hike, you're going to go into your back swing, and then sort of just lower it down to the floor safely. Now, how do you really put this all together? Because there's hundreds of videos out there basically saying the same types of things as I have. Well, the only way to really do it is to keep practicing, and to practice basically in chunks of time that don't tire you out, that don't put that pressure on you to be better than, everyone else, or whatever it is that kind of drives that sort of frustration, is just to look at one or two of these things. Don't overwhelm yourself with everything all at once. That's why I'm breaking it down into a swing, into an overhead lockout. Okay, that's the bottom of the kettlebell snatch, and the end halfway through, and then you want to be able to bring that down at the end. Okay, that brings you around full circle. Now what happens in between is that progression from the top down, where you're throwing it, and then into the bottom of the swing. Back up, you want to throw it, and back down, and up. Then you want to maybe practice from the swing up, so you're going swing, high pull, lockout. That starts to feel a bit more natural with a fairly light weight, but workable. It's not too light where it's really just like a flimsy thing, that it feels like it's loaded but not too much, so you're not ripping your hand up or kind of worried about the lockout and things like that. You want to have a weight that allows you to really practice the skill, and just repeat. On one day, you work at the beginning of your workout, maybe for skill, do a couple of sets, or if you want to maybe add it in at the end, if you have the energy left, then you can do like maybe 2 to 4 sets or 5 sets, but keep the reps really low. Okay, so you're really resetting, you're taking the time, so you're not rushing through all these reps and getting really tired, but you're going to really focus on the quality of the practice. And honestly, that is what it's all about. It's about frequent practice where you're not dying and that you're getting basically quality from it. I would probably do something like the half snatch, swing, snatch, press, clean, snatch, press. But if you're not able to do that yet from a full snatch, then you would go to swing, high pull, snatch. Okay, and then you'd go into your press. So that is basically how you would do it. When you finally do put it all together, you'll see that it really does, you do end up following the same trajectory. So grounding through the feet, hips a bit lower in that first rep, shoulder packed, you're going to pull the kettlebell high up, snap your hips forward, pull the arm in, lock out. From here, going to throw it down and follow back up again. Now when my hips snap, now something else is when you're doing a couple of repetitions, so you're getting good at putting it together, but you're finding that 2 or 3 reps in, or maybe it's 10 reps in, you're starting to really feel it in your hands. I would say the number one thing is that the hips aren't doing enough. They've stopped doing what they're supposed to, which means you're pulling from lower down, because if your hips are snapping and the arms floating, you're pulling from higher up already. So you're not actually pulling it up, you're just guiding it in, and then that lockout's happening because you have enough energy in the bell to allow it to meet there. So you don't need to actually pull any energy into it to make up for that. So always look at what your hips are doing. And that really just comes back to having endurance with your kettlebell swings, so that when you're doing a higher rep set of kettlebell snatches eventually, then you have the stamina to deal with that you're constantly repeating that good quality form. And as soon as that sort of stops, reset and look at building up more power from your hips so that you can guide the kettlebell into positions. So practice, and put these things together. Watch what your hips are doing. This is why I really focus on the kettlebell swing to start with. Your power is coming from your hips so that you don't have to muscle it up into the top position and not have a death grip. And so that means that you're already taking away so much effort from you. And that is part 2 and the final part, in fact, of the Kettlebell Snatch series. I had envisioned doing another, this in 3 parts, but given that it took me 7 months to put together part 2, I think that this will conclude the Kettlebell Snatch series. So I hope you liked it. If you have any questions at all about it, let me know in the comments below. Obviously you can share this video and subscribe to my channel if you like my style of teaching or my workouts and things. I really hope that you do. And I will hopefully be back soon with a new workout. Well everyone, that's it for today, and thank you for your patience in me making this video. Hopefully it helps and it makes things a little more clear in how to progress this and put everything together. But I think as well, it's about getting more from how you're practicing it, because the skill work is there, the how-tos are everywhere, but it's about applying them and really getting that support in applying it. And so hopefully you can see that little bits more often, not going to fatigue and not progressing the weight too much, because fatigue really does interfere with where our skill is and how efficient our movements are. And just really getting the pattern of the swing and the consistency of that into, so you're getting that power. And then obviously then just practicing under low stress environment. So sets of 5, resting, more sets of 5. As if you're doing something like Olympic weightlifting, you would do sets, maybe 1 or 2, but you would do multiple sets, so maybe 10 sets where you're working on something very high skill like that. So I would think of it like that, and putting the progressions together, focusing on one aspect each week, and then sort of putting it all together at the end. So I hope to be back soon with a new video, and obviously in the comments below let me know if you have any questions about this, and if you ever did want programming or any kind of help and support, coaching basically, on how you're doing, any technique feedback, then please reach out to me, because I do offer technique checks and also programs so that this helps you build your skills. It's not necessarily about, like I said, about all these elements. It is, but it's how you're able to put them together. Are you creating the environment for you and the situation in order to practice it? And sometimes that is what's lacking. It's not that you don't know enough, it's that you're not giving yourself the chance to apply it and do so in almost like you would be a judo player or Olympic weightlifter, where you're really honing a craft, and it's just helping you set those types of scenarios up so you get more from it. So if that's something you want, you know where I am. But in the meantime, hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you can take something from it and master the kettlebell snatch.